Some children don't scream when they're in pain, they draw it instead. When a quiet 7-year-old girl hands her teacher a disturbing drawing, it sets off a chain of events that no one in the small town of Willow Creek is prepared for. What begins as a whisper in a classroom grows into a powerful story of courage, silence, and the people brave enough to listen when others look away. But as the truth rises, so does the backlash. And one woman must choose between her job and doing what's right. Where will this journey lead when every system meant to protect hesitates? Before we dive in, tell us where in the world you're tuning in from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story might be even harder to forget. Layla Myers had a way of seeing what other teachers missed. It wasn't a sixth sense or anything supernatural. It was just that she paid attention. The kind of attention that made her forget to eat lunch some days, or kept her up at night replaying a child's odd glance or unfinished sentence. Her room was filled with color and noise, sure, but more than that, it was filled with patterns. And when those patterns broke, Layla noticed. She was leaning over a paint-streaked table, wiping dried glue off a corner, when she heard it. "It hurts when I sit." It wasn't loud, barely a whisper. The words came so softly, Layla almost thought she imagined them. But when she turned, cloth still in hand, she saw Aaliyah Brooks standing just a few feet away. The little girl was gripping a crumpled sketch pad so tightly her knuckles had turned pale against her deep brown skin. Layla froze, still bent at the waist, cloth clenched in her fingers. She blinked once, then twice. Her heart didn't race, yet. But there was a tug in her gut, something quiet but firm, like the feeling of realizing you've left your keys inside the locked car. "Aaliyah?" Layla straightened slowly, eyes never leaving the girl. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Aaliyah's lips parted as if to speak, but she looked down instead. Her voice was barely audible. "It just hurts when I sit too long." There was no drama in her tone, no trace of complaint, just a fact, one that felt far too heavy for a 7-year-old to carry so calmly. Layla swallowed, kneeling down to the girl's level. "Did something happen? Did you fall at recess, or maybe during gym?" Aaliyah shook her head too fast. "I fell. At home." Her voice trailed off at the end. "Okay," Layla tried to sound casual, kind. "Not scared. Can you come with me for a second, just to talk, just us?" She expected resistance, a childlike protest or glance toward her classmates for permission. But Aaliyah nodded, still gripping the sketch pad, and followed her across the room without a sound. They walked to the reading corner, bean bags and bookshelves lined with stories about friendship, courage, and animals that talked. It was a small, quiet space, half hidden from the rest of the room, safe, or as safe as a corner of a classroom could be. Layla gestured toward a beanbag. Aaliyah didn't sit. Instead, she stood stiffly, holding her sketch pad like a shield. Layla lowered herself onto a cushion, letting her voice go soft. "Hey, can you help me understand, Aaliyah? Did you fall on something hard, maybe the kitchen floor or the stairs?" "I slipped," Aaliyah said too quickly. "In the kitchen. I didn't see the water." Layla let that sit for a beat. "I see. Would it be okay if I take a look at where it hurts?" "Only if you're comfortable. I just want to help you feel better." Aaliyah's eyes flicked toward the classroom, then back to Layla. Her small fingers moved hesitantly, lifting the sleeve of her long cardigan just high enough to show faint marks on her upper arm. Faded now. Yellow-green, like aging bruises. The shape was unmistakable. "Fingers?" Layla's throat went dry. She reached forward, not to touch, but to steady herself on the edge of the beanbag. Her face betrayed nothing, or so she hoped. "Thank you for showing me," she said softly. "You're really brave." "I don't want to get in trouble," Aaliyah whispered. "You're not in trouble. Not even a little. Layla paused. Did someone hurt you, Aaliyah? I fell, Aaliyah repeated, and now her voice had that rehearsed, robotic tone Layla had heard before. Not from her students, but from her own younger self, years ago, when the truth was too complicated for small voices. They stayed there for another minute. No one said anything. The classroom buzzed behind them, pencils scratching, the hum of chatter, the rustling of backpacks being zipped. But here, in this corner, it was still. Layla finally stood. Let's go back to the others, okay? She said gently. Aaliyah nodded and walked back to her seat without looking up. She sat carefully, slow, like every inch of movement had to be measured. Layla watched her for the rest of the afternoon. She didn't mark papers or plan for tomorrow. She just watched. Aaliyah smiled when the others laughed, but always a half-second too late. She flinched when her elbow was bumped in line for the bathroom. She said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, ma'am," in a tone that didn't sound like a child, but like someone mimicking one. She never once leaned back in her seat. After the final bell rang and the kids spilled out into the hall, Layla sat alone at her desk, staring at her notes. Her hands were still. Her mind was not. It hurts when I sit. That sentence replayed again and again in her head, not just because of the words, but because of how they were said. Quietly, simply, like someone describing the weather. Layla looked at the wall clock, then at her phone, then at the empty corner of the room where Aaliyah had stood. She'd taught hundreds of kids. She'd seen scraped knees, broken arms, emotional breakdowns, anxiety attacks. But this was something else. She opened her laptop and clicked into the folder marked Resources. She found the now North Carolina, mandated reporter policy. She'd read it before, during orientation, in a room with fluorescent lights and bad coffee. But tonight, she read it differently. She didn't need proof. She didn't need the principal's approval. If she had reasonable suspicion, she was required by law and conscience to report it. She had suspicion, more than enough. Her finger hovered over the hotline number. Her eyes burned. Her body ached, but her resolve did not waver. She would call, daring again, just not yet. Not until she talked to someone first, someone who wouldn't dismiss her. Layla closed the laptop and stood. The sun had dipped low outside the window, painting the floor in orange stripes. She walked to the art shelf and picked up Aaliyah's sketchpad, left behind in the rush to dismissal. She flipped it open. Page after page of crayon drawings. Flowers, a house, a dog, a smiling sun. And on the last page, something else. Hair, a red stain underneath it, a belt lying next to it, and a small girl with large, hollow eyes. Layla didn't cry. Not then. She just sat down and held the sketchpad like a broken truth she wasn't ready to let go of. The hotline could wait 10 more minutes, but not much longer. Layla sat at the breakfast table with a steaming mug of tea untouched in her hands. The silence in her apartment wasn't peaceful like usual. It pressed down on her like a wet blanket. Her phone sat beside her on the table, screen dim, number still pulled up. North Carolina Child Protective Services hotline. She had stared at it for half an hour last night after the children left, read and reread the mandated reporter laws, watched the sun slide behind the buildings outside her window. But she hadn't called. Deck's effect, not yet. Because once she made that call, everything would change. Not just for Aaliyah, but for Layla too, and maybe even the entire school. She took a slow sip of her tea, now lukewarm and bitter. The hotline number stared back at her like a dare. She whispered to herself, today. It wasn't a promise, not yet. But it was something. Layla pulled into the school parking lot 20 minutes before the first bell. Her heart clenched when she saw the familiar buses lined up, the hum of the heating vents making little clouds rise from their tailpipes. A few sleepy kids shuffled up the sidewalk, backpacks bouncing behind them. She scanned the groups automatically, and there she was. Aaliyah. Same long cardigan, same sketch pad hugged tight to her chest. Her head was down. Her feet moved carefully, like she was walking on glass. Layla stepped out of her car and waited just outside the entrance. Aaliyah's eyes lifted briefly when she saw her, then dropped again. "Good morning, sweetheart," Layla said gently. "Morning," Aaliyah replied, voice small. They walked in together. Layla didn't press. She didn't want Aaliyah to freeze up. Instead, she just walked slowly beside her, adjusting her stride to match the girl's tentative steps. Inside the classroom, the familiar chaos began. Coats thrown on hooks, lunch boxes swapped, laughter erupting from inside jokes Layla would never fully understand. She moved through it all like a ghost. But Aaliyah didn't join the laughter. She went straight to her seat and opened her sketchpad, flipping to a blank page with slow, mechanical hands. Layla watched her for a moment longer than she meant to. When circle time began, Aaliyah sat on her knees instead of cross-legged like the others. Layla saw the slight wince, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the rug for balance. No one else noticed. Of course they didn't. They were 7. They were too busy fighting over who got to pick the weather card or who remembered the most words that started with L. Layla's voice was steady as she led them through the morning routine, but her mind kept flickering back to that last page in the sketchpad. The belt, the red stain, the girl with the hollow eyes. During centers, Layla made her way to the back of the classroom, where the kids worked on reading logs or puzzles. She squatted beside Aaliyah's table without speaking. The girl was coloring a lopsided flower with soft purple petals. "Pretty," Layla said. Aaliyah didn't look up. "It's a tulip," Layla nodded. "I like tulips. They're strong flowers." Aaliyah kept coloring. "They die fast." Layla bit her lip. "Sometimes, yeah. But they come back, too. Every spring." Aaliyah didn't respond, but her coloring slowed. Layla glanced at the clock. 20 minutes until recess. She stood and crossed the room to her desk, pulled out a yellow pad of sticky notes and scribbled 2 words in quick, careful print. Principal Lawson. She didn't want to go. She already knew how the conversation would go. She could hear the principal's voice already measured, dismissive, the tone of someone more concerned with protocol than people. But Layla wasn't going to sit on this anymore. At recess, once the kids spilled outside, Layla asked the aide to cover for 5 minutes. She walked down the long hallway, her heels silent against the tile, every step a battle between confidence and fear. The door to the principal's office was half closed. She knocked once and then pushed it open. Principal Lawson looked up from her desk, adjusting her glasses. "Morning, Layla. Everything okay?" Layla stepped inside, shut the door behind her. "I'm concerned about Aaliyah Brooks." Lawson blinked. "What kind of concern?" Layla inhaled. "She told me yesterday, very quietly, that it hurts when she sits. She's avoiding chairs. I saw bruises on her upper arm. They looked like fingerprints." Lawson's brow furrowed, but her tone stayed flat. "You're suggesting abuse." "I'm suggesting something's not right," Layla said, heat rising in her throat. "I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between a kitchen fall and a lie rehearsed by a child." Lawson leaned back, folding her hands. "Kids fall, Layla. They bump into things. You know that." These weren't bruises from a bump, and she's showing signs: emotional withdrawal, hypervigilance, flinching at contact, drawing violent imagery. "You've been through our reporting training," Lawson interrupted. "You know the policy. We document, we monitor, and we escalate if necessary. But without concrete evidence, we can't accuse a parent of abuse." She drew a picture, Layla said, her voice cracking now. A chair, a belt, blood, herself. Lawson sighed. I understand this is hard for you, but if we go to CPS without undeniable proof, it opens up the school to liability. We need to proceed carefully. Layla stared at her, something in her chest beginning to splinter. Carefully, that word again, like it was a bandage, like it could protect children. I'm gonna report it, Layla said quietly. Lawson's gaze narrowed. Without my authorization? I don't need it, Layla replied. I'm a mandated reporter, and I believe she's being hurt. Lawson exhaled, her tone growing cold. I strongly recommend you reconsider. Once you make that call, it's out of our hands, and if it turns out to be nothing, then I'll be wrong, Layla said. But I'd rather be wrong than silent. She turned and walked out before the principal could respond. Back in her classroom, the students were lining up for lunch. Aaliyah was at the back of the line, hands folded over her stomach, sketchpad pressed to her side. Layla smiled at her, soft and small. Hope you're hungry. Aaliyah shrugged. That was it. That little shrug. The kind kids give when they're trying not to cry in front of their friends. Layla watched her file out with the others, then walked to her desk, picked up her phone, and stared at the hotline number one more time. This time she didn't hesitate. She called. Her voice was calm as she gave the details. Aaliyah's name, age, what she had said, what Layla had seen. She answered every question, gave them everything. And when she hung up, she placed the phone face down and stared at the wall. She didn't feel relief. Not yet. But for the first time in days, she didn't feel powerless either. That night, she would sleep with her phone on the pillow beside her, because the next part was coming, and Layla was ready to fight for a little girl who couldn't. Layla didn't know what she expected after the call. Maybe that someone from CPS would show up in a dark sedan with a clipboard and a firm knock at the front office. Maybe an immediate sense of clarity, or righteousness, or even just relief. But the next morning, everything looked exactly the same. The school was still humming with the sound of sneakers against tile and lockers slamming. Teachers still carried coffee in one hand and stress in the other. Nobody knew what she had done the day before. Not yet. And that made it feel even heavier. Layla stood by her door, greeting each student with her usual smile, though this time it felt more like a costume. The kids filed in, one by one. Tyson with his dragon hoodie, Jasmine with her glitter backpack, and finally Aaliyah. Her shoulders were sloped like always, her movements careful, guarded. Good morning, Aaliyah, Layla said softly. The girl glanced up just enough to meet her eyes. Morning. She moved to her desk without another word, sliding into the seat slowly, her face unreadable. The sketchpad was in her arms again, worn at the corners, the cover bent from weeks of use. Layla waited until everyone was settled into their morning work before walking over to Aaliyah's table. She knelt down so she wouldn't tower over her and kept her voice gentle. Did you draw anything new yesterday? Aaliyah blinked and hesitated, like she was trying to decide whether to answer. Then, slowly, she pushed the sketchpad toward Layla. It wasn't open, just resting at the edge of her desk like an offering. May I look? Layla asked. Aaliyah nodded once, still not looking at her. Layla lifted the cover, her fingers trembling, just enough that she had to steady the book with her other hand. She flipped past the earlier pages, sunsets, stick figures, rainbows, a few scribbled notes in the margin about cats and birthdays. Then she got to the new page. It stopped her breath. This one showed a living room. The lines were childlike but clear. A man's figure was standing, tall, dark scribbles where the face should be. A child was kneeling on the floor. Next to her on the carpet was a belt. And on the child's back, drawn in red crayon, were long, wide marks. Layla closed the sketchpad slowly. Aaliyah was watching her now, not blinking, not moving. Layla didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her hand reached out and gently touched Aaliyah's arm. Barely a brush of contact, just enough to say, "I see you. I believe you." It felt like a check or a pat on the back, and Aaliyah didn't flinch this time. She just looked down. The moment was interrupted by the phone ringing on Layla's desk. She stood, her chest tight, and crossed the room. "Miss Myers," she answered, voice measured. "Miss Myers, this is Miss Chen from the front office," the secretary said. "There's someone here from Child Protective Services. She's asking to speak with you privately, if possible." Layla blinked. "Okay, I'll head down." As she hung up, her students were busy trading pencils and whispering about who had gym that afternoon. The world was still spinning, but to Layla, it felt like the floor had shifted. She found the substitute box in her cabinet and waved for the aide across the hall. "I need to step out," she said quietly. "Can you cover for 10 minutes?" The aide nodded. Layla made her way to the front office, her pulse ticking in her ears. When she stepped inside, she saw a woman sitting on the vinyl couch, a brown folder in her lap. Late 30s, maybe? Simple blouse, hair pulled back, no makeup. No smile. She stood when Layla entered. "Ms. Myers?" "Yes." "I'm Carla Jennings with CPS," she said, holding out her hand. "I'm here in response to your report about Aaliyah Brooks." Layla shook her hand firmly, the weight of the moment grounding her. "Can we speak in private?" Carla asked. They used the nurse's office since it was empty. Carla sat on the edge of the cot while Layla took the small chair beside the sink. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and bandages. "I reviewed your report," Carla began, flipping open the folder. "I understand you noticed some physical injuries, and that Aaliyah made a concerning statement to you." "Yes," Layla said. She said, "It hurts when I sit." She's been avoiding sitting down. I noticed bruises on her upper arm, shaped like fingers. She claimed she fell, but it sounded rehearsed. Then she showed me drawings, pictures that suggest physical abuse. Carla nodded slowly, writing something down. She also flinches when touched. And she isolates herself from the other students. She's compliant, but in a way that feels trained. Carla stopped writing and looked up. "That's a good observation. Not a lot of teachers pick up on that." Layla exhaled. "I've seen it before. Not in my class, but when I was young." There was a pause. "Do you feel she's in immediate danger?" Carla asked. "I don't know. But I know something isn't right. She's scared." Carla closed the folder. "Thank you for calling. Some teachers hesitate." Layla didn't say anything. She wasn't proud. She was late, if anything. "What happens now?" she asked. "I'll speak with Aaliyah today," Carla said. "Privately, in a way that won't raise suspicion. I'll also be making a home visit. If I feel there's enough, we'll open a case." Layla's hands curled into her lap. "Please be careful with her. She's very quiet. She probably won't say much." "That's okay. We're trained for that. Sometimes the drawings tell us more than the words ever could." Layla nodded, grateful and afraid all at once. Back in her classroom, Aaliyah looked up as she walked in. Layla gave her the softest smile she could muster, and Aaliyah looked back down at her paper. 10 minutes later, Carla stepped into the room. She approached Layla's desk and whispered, "I'm going to ask her to come with me for a minute. We'll say it's a reading test." Layla nodded. Carla knelt by Aaliyah's table. "Hi there, Aaliyah. Would you help me with a reading activity in the library? It'll only take a little while." Aaliyah looked at Layla, unsure. Layla smiled gently. "It's okay. I'll be right here when you come back." Aaliyah rose slowly, sketch pad still in hand, and followed Carla out the door. Layla turned to the board, started a phonics activity, but her mind was far from long vowels. She didn't know what Aaliyah would say. She didn't know if the system would protect her. But for the first time, someone else knew. someone with the power to do more than just care. That night, Layla would sit alone in her apartment again, staring at her phone, hoping for a call, and though it didn't come, she would hold Aaliyah's last drawing in her mind like a prayer. Because the next page hadn't been drawn yet, and Layla needed to believe it could still end differently than the last one. The day after Aaliyah's private meeting with CPS, the classroom felt strangely empty, even though every chair was full. Layla kept glancing toward Aaliyah's seat more than she meant to, hoping for some sign, some small shift, that would let her know how the conversation had gone. But Aaliyah was the same, or maybe even quieter than before. She didn't draw that morning. That was the first thing Layla noticed. She usually opened her sketchpad right after hanging her backpack, like it grounded her. But today it sat zipped inside her bag, unopened, protected. Layla didn't ask, didn't push, but her heart beat a little harder every time Aaliyah shifted in her seat or pulled her sleeves down over her hands. By the time lunch rolled around, Layla's stomach was in knots. She barely touched her food. The sound of kids laughing and swapping juice boxes did nothing to settle the weight sitting behind her ribs. She knew CPS worked slow sometimes, and she understood the reasons. But watching Aaliyah walk back into the same pattern, quiet, stiff, obedient, made patience feel like a cruel thing. Layla was wiping down a sticky corner of a desk when a voice came over the intercom. "Ms. Myers, please report to the front office." The classroom hushed. Every kid looked up. Some whispered, trying to guess if she was in trouble. Layla forced a smile. "Hold tight. Mrs. Allen will be in to help in just a second." As she stepped into the hallway, her palms began to sweat. She found Principal Lawson waiting just outside the office, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Layla offered a cautious nod. "You called me?" "Yes, come in." They walked into the principal's office together, the door clicking softly shut behind them. The air inside was too still, like someone had turned the oxygen down just a little too low. Lawson gestured to a chair. Layla sat without a word. "I received a call this morning," Lawson began, "from Aaliyah's father." Layla's spine straightened. "Was contacted by Child Protective Services last night. As you can imagine, he's upset. He's requested a meeting with us." Layla didn't flinch. "I reported what I saw. I followed protocol." Lawson exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding something in. "Miss Myers, do you understand the weight of what you've done? Making a CPS report isn't a light matter." "I didn't treat it like one. There was no confirmed evidence, no open wound, no statement of direct harm, only bruises, and a few drawings." Layla's voice tightened. "Drawings that show a child being hurt." "Interpretation," Lawson said flatly. "Children draw monsters, fire, aliens. Their imaginations go to strange places. We can't base an accusation off crayon illustrations." "She told me it hurts to sit. And then she said she fell." Layla stared, letting the silence settle like a stone. "Do you know how many kids lie to protect the people who hurt them? I know how many teachers have destroyed families with false assumptions." Layla's jaw clenched. "So we do nothing?" "No," Lawson said. "You already did something, and now we have to manage it." Layla wanted to speak, but Lawson continued. "I've arranged a meeting for tomorrow morning. You, me, Mr. Brooks. He's been cooperative so far, but he's angry. Claims he's being unfairly targeted." Layla's stomach turned. "Did CPS tell you anything else?" she asked. Lawson nodded. "They conducted a home visit, found no obvious cause for alarm. Clean house. Food in the fridge. Aaliyah has her own room." "Clean homes don't mean safe homes," Layla said. Lawson's tone dropped a few degrees colder. "They're not removing her at this time. The case is under preliminary review, nothing more. Unless further evidence is presented, the investigation could be closed in a matter of weeks." Layla felt like she'd been shoved underwater. Her ears rang, her lungs tightened. "And if she comes in next week with more bruises?" she asked. "Then you report again," Lawson said. "But in the meantime, we tread lightly. I expect you to be professional during tomorrow's meeting. We're not prosecutors, we're educators, and this is still a community school." The word stung in a way Layla didn't expect, because it wasn't just a reminder, it was a warning. The next morning came like a slow storm. The rain hadn't started, but the sky looked bruised, swollen, with something waiting to break. Layla arrived early, earlier than usual. She didn't want to walk in with Mr. Brooks or sit across from him without having her breath steady first. When he did arrive, she knew it was him before he even spoke. Tall, built like a man who'd spent time in manual labor, with shoulders too squared for comfort. His expression was carved out of stone, tight jaw, eyes like smoke. He walked into the principal's office like it belonged to him. Layla didn't stand. He did not extend his hand. "This her?" he asked, eyes fixed on her. Layla nodded once. "Yes. Think you've got the right to drag my family into this?" She kept her voice even. "Because I care about your daughter." "You care?" He gave a sharp laugh. "You care so much you sent strangers to my door? Had them questioning my parenting? Asking about what goes on in my home?" "I saw signs of harm. I couldn't ignore them." She bruised her arm. "Kids fall. That's not abuse." She said it hurts when she sits. She draws pictures of belts and blood. "He's a kid. Kids say things." Lawson raised a hand. "Let's keep this civil." Layla ignored her. "Does she have to bleed in the hallway before we believe her?" Mr. Brooks took a step closer. Layla didn't move. "You don't know what it's like, raising a kid on your own. You don't know how hard it is when no one cuts you any slack. And now you want to paint me as some kind of monster?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Layla wanted to scream. She wanted to reach across the desk and shake someone, anyone, into understanding. But she didn't. She sat still, because someone had to be. Lawson stepped in again. "Mr. Brooks, I understand your frustration. We're here to support your family, not destroy it. You got a funny way of showing it." He pushed away from the desk and stood tall. "I'm watching, Ms. Myers. You look at my daughter funny again, you try to fill her head with nonsense, I'll come back here with a lawyer." Then he turned and left. No goodbye, no glance back. The room went quiet. Layla looked at Lawson, who said nothing. Her face was unreadable, hands folded too tightly in her lap. "I did what was right," Layla whispered. "I hope so," Lawson replied. But she didn't sound like she believed it. Aaliyah didn't speak for the rest of that week. Not to Layla. Not to her classmates. Not even during group activities where every other child buzzed with chatter and giggles. Aaliyah sat still. Not frozen, not afraid in an obvious way. Just quiet. As if someone had pressed pause on her voice and thrown away the remote. Layla watched her every day, hoping for signs of change. Something. Anything. But all she saw was silence, moving like fog around the girl, thickening. It was worse during art. Normally, Aaliyah would draw for the entire class period, losing herself in swirls of color and sketchy shapes that no one but she could fully explain. But now, her sketch pad remained unopened in her backpack. Her hands rested in her lap, eyes low. The other kids barely noticed. They had their own little universes to spin in. But Layla noticed everything. How Aaliyah flinched when loud voices echoed from the hallway. How she sat carefully on the edge of her chair, barely letting her weight touch the seat. How she kept looking at the classroom door, like she expected someone to walk in any second and drag her out. On Thursday, Layla asked her to stay in for lunch. She made it sound casual, no pressure. Hey, Aaliyah, you mind hanging out with me for a little bit during lunch? I could use some help organizing the crayons. Aaliyah nodded, but didn't look up. When the classroom emptied and the door clicked shut behind the last bouncing backpack, Layla pulled out the art box and set it on the rug. I'm always mixing the reds and pinks, she said. They look the same after a while. Aaliyah sank to her knees across from her. Her movements were slow but deliberate. She started sorting the crayons by shade without a word. Layla let a few minutes pass. She didn't want to jump in too fast. Did you have pancakes for breakfast today? Aaliyah gave the faintest shake of her head. Cereal? Another tiny shake. Layla smiled softly. Me neither. I had coffee and a granola bar, I regret. A beat passed, then another. Layla reached over and picked up a stubby black crayon. Used to draw a lot of animals. Do you like animals? Aaliyah shrugged. Layla kept her voice low. I used to draw cats when I was little. Always the same cat. Ears too big, nose too small. Still nothing. She placed the black crayon down, let the silence grow thick again, and then, finally, gently broke it. Aaliyah, do you remember the lady you talked to the other day? Miss Jennings. Aaliyah stopped sorting. Her hand hovered over the green crayons. She told me she was really proud of you. Nothing. Layla continued, slower now. Sometimes, even when we're scared, saying a little bit can make a big difference. Aaliyah's voice came so quiet, Layla had to lean closer to hear it. Did I do something bad? Layla's chest tightened. No, sweetie, not at all. Daddy said if I talk again, I'll go live somewhere else. Without him. Layla reached out, careful not to touch her, just letting her hand rest near Aaliyah's on the rug. He told you that? Aaliyah nodded, a single, small motion, like a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to share. Layla didn't blink, didn't breathe for a moment. Said I made people think he's a monster. That I'm lying. That if I keep lying, they'll take me away and I'll be alone forever. She said it all in one breath, like she had rehearsed it over and over again. Layla stared at her, unsure whether to cry or scream or both. You are not a liar, she said gently but firmly, and you're not alone. Aaliyah's eyes shimmered, not quite crying, not yet, but close. Can I stay here at lunch tomorrow too? Yes, Layla whispered. Of course. The next day, Aaliyah came in before Layla even asked. She sat quietly at the back of the classroom during lunch, sketchpad open again. She didn't speak, but she drew. New picture. It was a window this time. A small girl sitting inside, looking out. Her face had no mouth, just eyes. And a tear. Layla wrote a note to herself under the desk. No voice, still watching. Drawing speaks when she can. She didn't know what to do with it, yet. By Monday, the school buzzed with talk of the fall festival. Teachers were putting up signs in the hall, asking for donations. Apple cider, paper cups, pumpkin-themed prizes. Layla felt sick every time she passed one. She pulled Miss Carter, the school counselor, aside that afternoon. Denise, she whispered, eyes darting around. I need your help. Again. Denise looked tired, always did, but she gave her a nod. What's going on? Layla explained. Aaliyah's silence, the new drawing, the threats the girl had whispered. He paused, thinking. Denise listened, arms folded, nodding slowly. I can't force another investigation without new evidence, she said. But I can document this. I can attach it to the open file. And I can talk to her again. Off the record. Layla handed her a copy of the drawing. I just don't want her to disappear into the system, she said. Or worse. Stay exactly where she is. Denise looked at the sketch and her eyes darkened. I'll talk to her tomorrow, in my office. Quietly. And she did. Aaliyah was called down during library time. When she returned, her eyes were puffy, but she walked taller. Not a lot, but enough that Layla noticed. At the end of the day, Denise sent Layla a message. She confirmed some of it. Still scared, still vague, but we've got enough to request another visit. Layla read it 5 times before deleting it. That night she lay in bed staring at her ceiling. The heater clicked in the corner. Her cat curled at her feet. But her mind was back in the classroom, on the rug, with a little girl who thought her drawings were safer than her words. And Layla knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But at least the silence was cracking, even if it was just a whisper. She would keep listening, no matter how long it took. The halls always felt lonelier after the last bell rang. Desks sat empty, chairs slightly askew like they were caught mid-conversation. Drawings fluttered on the walls in the afternoon breeze from the vents, their tape edges peeling. Layla moved quietly through the classroom, her heels clicking soft against the floor as she picked up pencils left behind and smoothed out a forgotten spelling test with smudged eraser marks. She should have gone home. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and her head ached with that dull, behind-the-eyes kind of pressure that only teachers and nurses seemed to get. But her body wouldn't let her leave. Not yet. Not while Aaliyah's sketch pad was still tucked in her drawer, the most recent pages heavy with unspoken truth. Layla sat at her desk and pulled out the worn spiral notebook. She flipped through it slowly, page by page. Aaliyah had drawn something new today. The same small girl again, this time with a taped mouth and lines around her thick black bars like a cage. The windows were gone now, so was the tear. It was different from the others. There was anger in the lines. Not fear, not sadness. Anger. Layla traced a finger along one of the bars, not touching the paper, just hovering. A small noise escaped her throat. She didn't realize how tightly she was gripping the edges until her fingers started to cramp. This couldn't wait. She closed the sketch pad, slipped it into her tote, and opened her laptop. The CPS portal loaded slowly, the spinning wheel pausing just long enough to test her nerves. She typed in her login and clicked the tab marked Update on Open Case. She attached the new photo and included her notes. Student continues to exhibit physical and emotional signs consistent with trauma. Most recent artwork depicts herself in a restrained position, consistent with symbolic expressions of silence and isolation. Student disclosed in confidence that she fears being removed from her home and has been threatened with abandonment if she speaks further. Recommend urgent follow-up. She hit send. Then she stared at the screen, half expecting it to blink back with answers, but nothing happened. Just a quiet little confirmation message. Submission received. Thank you. Layla leaned back and closed her eyes. For a moment, all she heard was the hum of the lights and the distant squeak of a janitor's cart rolling past. The world was moving. Barely. She didn't know what to do with her hands. Or her voice. So she picked up her phone and dialed the only person she could trust right now. Denise Carter answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey," she said, voice hushed like she was still in her office. "I updated the report," Layla said. "I attached the new drawing and the disclosure. I wrote it all out." Denise let out a breath on the other end. "Good. That's good. I'll follow up with them tomorrow. But Layla..." We're in delicate territory now. They're already being cautious because there wasn't enough to remove her the first time. Now it's a matter of patterns, layers. They're watching, but they're not ready to move yet. "She's unraveling," Layla whispered. "I can see it. It's like she's begging for someone to pull her out of this, and we're just stalling." I know, but we can't pull her ourselves." Layla gritted her teeth. "Why not? Why not just do something? Why not send someone in right now with a badge or a warrant or something that makes it stop? Because it's not how the system works. I don't care how the system works. It's broken. I'm not disagreeing with you. Denise's voice softened. I'm just saying we have to play the long game if we want to win it. If we jump too fast, it falls apart. I don't want to be careful anymore. I know. There was a pause. Go home, Denise said gently. Eat something, sleep, come back tomorrow, and be the same safe place you've been for her all along. Layla hung up and sat there, fingers frozen on the edge of her desk. She didn't move for a long time. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling with the lights still on. Her apartment felt too quiet, too far away from the noise of the school, from the rhythm of Aaliyah's soft footsteps. She'd become haunted by the shape of that little girl's silence, by the careful way she sat, the stiffness in her spine, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. Layla sat up in bed around 1 a.m. and pulled out her laptop again. She didn't open emails or lesson plans. Instead, she typed in a new search: legal responsibilities of a mandated reporter in North Carolina. She read everything, every clause, every line. The language was sterile, clinical, but behind the words were years of stories, just like Aaliyah's. Some that ended with rescue, some that didn't end well at all. She scrolled down to the frequently asked questions. Q. What happens if I report suspected abuse and nothing is found? A. Mandated reporters are protected by law when reporting in good faith. Q. What if I suspect retaliation against the child after reporting? A. Report that as a new concern. Patterns of intimidation should be documented. Layla clicked open a blank document and began to write a timeline. Every moment she could remember since Aaliyah whispered those 6 words. Dates, conversations, drawings, the meeting with the father, the principal's comments, Aaliyah's changes in behavior, the bruises. By the time the sun began to rise, she had 5 pages of notes. She'd printed them out before school and tucked them into a folder labeled Confidential. That morning, Aaliyah didn't speak again, but she handed Layla a folded piece of notebook paper before unpacking her things. Inside was a drawing. This time, it wasn't dark. It wasn't a room or a belt or a cage. It was a woman, in a red cape, standing in front of a little girl. The girl was crying, but the woman had her arms stretched wide like she was keeping something back. The sky was blue. There were birds. At the bottom, in shaky block letters, Aaliyah had written, "Can you help me fly?" Layla stared at the paper so long she didn't realize her hands were shaking. When she looked up, Aaliyah was at her desk, coloring quietly. Layla sat down slowly. Her chest hurt, not in the sharp, panicked way, but in the way something does when it's breaking open just enough to let something else in. She placed the drawing in the folder, right behind the timeline, because if no one else was going to keep the full story straight, she would. Word by word, picture by picture, until someone listened, until someone saved her, until the system woke up, and until then, Layla would not back down. Not now, not ever. The day started like any other, but nothing about it felt normal. Layla was brushing chalk dust off the corner of her blouse when her classroom phone rang. It wasn't the kind of time the office usually called. Mid-morning, right in the middle of math centers. The sound cut through the hum of whispered addition problems and the clicking of counting cubes like a knife. She hesitated before answering, her hand hovering just above the receiver. A dozen worst-case scenarios ran through her mind before she finally picked up. "Ms. Myers," said the secretary, her voice calm but clipped. "There's a Detective Rowley here from the Willow Creek Police Department. He's requesting to speak with you in private." Layla blinked. "The detective?" "Yes, ma'am. He says it's in connection to a report you made. He's with someone from Child Protective Services as well." Layla's breath caught. "Tell him I'll be right there." She hung up slowly. Her heart thudded against her ribs, once, twice, and then again like a drumline. She turned to the teaching aide with a practiced calmness she didn't feel. "Would you mind watching the class for a few minutes?" she asked. The aide nodded. Layla stepped out into the hallway, closed the door behind her, and began the long walk down the corridor toward the front office. It felt like the floor dropped with each step. Her feet moved, but everything above them was locked in a different time zone. Her stomach knotted tighter with every door she passed. When she entered the front office, she immediately recognized Carla Jennings from CPS, standing off to the side, clipboard in hand. Next to her stood a man in a gray blazer, mid-40s, buzzed haircut, no nonsense in his posture. "Ms. Myers," he said, stepping forward. "I'm Detective Rowley. Mind if we talk somewhere a bit more private?" They moved into a small conference room. Layla sat down last, her palms flat against her thighs to stop them from shaking. "We wanted to inform you," Carla began, "that based on your continued reports and Aaliyah's latest conversation with our counselor yesterday, we've initiated a joint investigation. Law enforcement has been brought in to assist." Layla's throat tightened. "What does that mean? For her?" Detective Rowley leaned forward, fingers interlocked. "It means we're now treating this as a formal abuse case, not just a CPS inquiry. We've obtained a warrant to conduct a second, more thorough search of the home." Layla stared at him. She wasn't breathing. "This morning we spoke with Aaliyah again. This time she disclosed more." "Enough." Layla didn't ask what more meant. She didn't want to hear it. Not yet. Not in this room with two strangers and a window that looked out at nothing. She said, "Layla, I mean..." She was specific, she asked softly. "She was scared," Carla said. "But yes, she told us that the belt he keeps on the top shelf in the hallway closet is used when she disappoints him. She said she's not allowed to cry or it gets worse." Layla shut her eyes. Carla continued. "She also said he told her people would try to lie to her, that if she told, they'd take her to live with strangers who hit harder. He used fear as control." The detective's voice was firm. "We'll be executing the warrant this evening. Depending on what we find, we may file charges the same night." Layla opened her eyes slowly. "What about Aaliyah? Is she safe right now?" Carla nodded. "We removed her this morning after the interview. She's in a temporary placement for now, safe. She didn't want to leave without saying goodbye." Layla's eyes welled, but she blinked quickly, hiding it. "I didn't even know she was gone," she whispered. "We did it quietly. On purpose," Carla said, "for her safety." Layla nodded. Her heart was a storm. "He left something for you." Carla reached into a manila folder and slid over a folded piece of notebook paper. Layla picked it up with shaking hands and slowly opened it. Aaliyah had drawn another picture. This time, it was the same small girl, but she was holding hands with a tall woman wearing red shoes and a blue dress, Layla's usual Friday outfit. Behind them was an open door with the word home written in big wobbly letters. In the top corner, Aaliyah had scrawled, "Thank you for seeing me." That was all. Layla swallowed hard, pressing the page to her chest. "We'll be keeping her location confidential," Carla added, "but if things move the way we hope, she'll be eligible for placement with extended family, possibly her aunt, someone stable." Layla nodded again. Her voice had left her. Every part of her body felt like it had melted and reformed. Harder now, but more brittle, too. The detective rose to leave. Carla followed. "We'll keep you informed," she said. "Please," Layla said, her voice hoarse. "Please, make sure she's okay." "She's stronger than she knows," Carla said. "But she told us you were the first person who ever believed her." Layla didn't respond. She couldn't. She just stood there long after they left, the drawing still clutched to her chest. That night, Layla didn't go home. Not right away. She stayed in her classroom, the lights off except for the glow from her desk lamp. She pulled out every drawing Aaliyah had given her and laid them in order, side by side. Silence. Pages. Windows. A hero. A goodbye. Together they told a story no one had wanted to hear. And tonight, finally, someone had listened. Layla packed them into a folder and labeled it Aaliyah Truth. She placed it in her locked cabinet. And then, for the first time in weeks, she let herself cry. Not because she had failed, but because, just maybe, she hadn't. The system had moved. The cage had cracked. And Aaliyah, wherever she was no longer sitting in silence. She had spoken, and her words had been enough. It was raining the next morning when Layla arrived at school. Not the gentle kind of rain that soaked the streets and made everything smell like earth, but a cold, relentless drizzle that blurred the parking lot and turned the hallway windows into trembling gray sheets. She pulled her coat tight around her and walked quickly through the lot, but her shoes still caught the edge of a puddle. Water splashed up the side of her leg. She didn't flinch. Nothing could reach her right now. Not the rain, not the cold, not even the silence left behind by Aaliyah's empty desk. When she walked into her classroom, it hit her harder than she expected. The seat was still there, the sketch pad gone. The child that once sat so small in that space, gone. And yet her presence echoed everywhere. In the bookshelf she always leaned against, the crayon drawer she kept meticulously organized, the small strip of paper with her name still taped to the desk in crooked letters. Layla paused there, hand on the chair. She pulled the name tag off gently and slid it into the top drawer of her desk. Not to erase her, but to protect her. At 10:00 a.m. she was called into a meeting with Principal Lawson and Denise Carter. Layla sat across from them at the same oval table they'd used weeks earlier when Mr. Brooks had come in with rage in his eyes. But this time the air felt heavier, not with anger, but something closer to consequence. Lawson folded her hands on the table, her expression unreadable. "There's been a development," she said. "Mr. Brooks was arrested late last night. The search of his home revealed several items that matched the girl's descriptions, including the belt and written schedules taped inside the closet showing when she was to be punished for infractions." Layla's stomach turned. Her face stayed still. "They also found video surveillance," Denise added quietly. "Internal. He was recording her without her knowledge, especially in her bedroom." Layla's hand shot to her mouth. She couldn't finish. Lawson leaned forward. "He's being held without bond. He's facing multiple charges: child abuse, endangerment, unlawful surveillance. There will be a trial, but for now, Aaliyah is safe." Denise touched her arm lightly. "She asked about you." Layla looked up, eyes wet. "She wanted to know if you got her picture. Said it was the most important one." "I did," Layla whispered. "She'll be staying with her aunt while the case moves forward. Out of town for now. But they've asked for your name to be added to the approved contact list." Layla blinked, stunned. "She asked for me." Denise nodded. "Said you were the only adult who didn't look away." Layla pressed her lips together. There were no words strong enough to fit inside the moment, so she sat there, heart thudding, tears welling, but something inside her beginning to breathe again. Lawson cleared her throat, tone shifting. "There's another matter." Layla knew that voice. She braced herself. "We've received a letter from Mr. Brooks' attorney. He's alleging emotional distress and defamation due to your actions. They're threatening legal action against both you and the school district." Layla's spine straightened. "You're joking." "I'm not. Though the district's legal team doesn't believe they have a strong case, given the outcome of the investigation. They've advised us to proceed carefully. Publicly, we'll make no statements. And we recommend you do the same." "I don't care if he sues me," Layla said flatly. He can't erase what he did. Denise gave her a look, firm but kind. And we won't let him. Lawson exhaled through her nose. We stand by your actions, Miss Myers, but be prepared there may be media attention, rumors. The community can get unpredictable when stories like this come to light. I understand, Layla said. She didn't really, not fully. But it didn't matter. Because none of it, no lawsuit, no headlines, no whispering in staff lounges, could touch what had already been done. A child had been saved. And the bruises finally had a voice. After the meeting, Layla stepped outside into the courtyard and stood under the small overhang that overlooked the soccer field. The rain was lighter now, more like mist. She stared out at the empty yard, her arms folded tight against herself. She thought about how many Aaliyahs existed. How many children slipped between the cracks because someone told themselves it wasn't their business, or there wasn't enough proof, or kids fall down all the time. She thought about how close this one had come, how easily it all could have been brushed aside. She pulled her phone from her pocket and opened a message from an unknown number. It was from Carla Jennings. Aaliyah smiled today, just once, but it was real. Thought you'd want to know. Layla stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then she typed. Thank you. Please tell her I miss her. And I'll always be here if she needs me. She hit send and tucked the phone away. When she returned to her classroom, the students were finishing up a writing prompt about their favorite animals. A few were drawing, others chattering about dolphins and jaguars and imaginary rainbow bears. Layla looked at the empty desk again, and this time, instead of sadness, she felt something else settle inside her. Resolve. She walked over to the class library, pulled out a fresh composition book and labeled it. A place to say the hard things. She set it in a small basket next to the tissue box and placed a sign above it. You can always talk to me, even if it's with drawings. She didn't make a big speech, didn't explain it, just left it there. Because maybe, just maybe, the next child who needed to say something hard wouldn't have to wait as long. Maybe they'd see that basket and know someone was listening. Someone always would be. It had been 12 days since Aaliyah left the classroom. 12 days since her small voice whispered its truth into Layla's world and left behind a silence that filled every corner of the room. 12 days, and still, no one sat in her seat. Layla had quietly asked the front office to hold off on reassigning it. She didn't explain why. Didn't need to. The aide who handled seating charts had nodded once, respectfully, and moved on. The desk sat empty, untouched, like a space reserved for something sacred. The name tag was gone, but the ghost of her remained. And the class had noticed. Well, the kids didn't say much about it, at least not to Layla, but they whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. Is she coming back? Did she move? I saw her leave with the lady in the pantsuit. Layla didn't correct them. Some questions needed quiet more than answers. What she did do was make space. For grief, for confusion, for the discomfort that came from not knowing how to ask what your heart is aching to understand. That new composition book by the tissue box? It filled faster than she expected, scribbled secrets, questions in shaky print, crayon drawings that spoke louder than full paragraphs. One student, Jamal, drew a heart with cracks down the middle and wrote, "My cousin cries every time his dad yells. I don't know what to do." Another girl, Emily, left only a note. "I hate the noise in my house. I wear headphones, but I still hear it." Layla didn't press them, didn't turn it into a lesson or a meeting. She wrote small, private notes back, tucked into their folders, discreet and kind. You are not alone. Thank you for being brave. It's okay to talk, even when it's scary. By the end of the second week, The notebook was nearly full. She added a second, and made a plan to speak with Denise about starting a weekly check-in circle, anonymous if needed. This wasn't just about Aaliyah anymore. It never had been. Late one afternoon, Layla was walking the hallway with her planner tucked under her arm when she heard someone call her name, Mrs. Myers. She turned to see a tall woman approaching, coat dusted with dried raindrops, a tote bag slung over one shoulder. Her hair was tied back, her eyes tired, but something familiar sat behind them. "Yes?" Layla said softly. The woman nodded. "My name's Melissa. I'm Aaliyah's aunt." Layla's heart skipped. Melissa stepped closer, her hand reaching into her bag. "I wasn't sure if I should come, but Aaliyah asked me to bring this." She pulled out the sketch pad, the same one Aaliyah had carried every day. Worn edges, a broken spiral, the corner slightly torn. Layla reached for it, her hands trembling. "She said you kept the drawings she gave you." Melissa said that you believed her, even when no one else did. Layla couldn't speak. She flipped it open slowly. There were new drawings now. One showed a house with curtains open wide, a girl standing by the window, arms outstretched like she was greeting the sun. Another showed Layla, red shoes, blue dress, cape fluttering, only this time she wasn't shielding anyone. She was holding a lantern. And in the center of the final page was a simple line of text. "Thank you for the light." Layla closed her eyes. Melissa's voice was quiet. "She still has nightmares, but she doesn't hide under the covers anymore. She asks for warm milk before bed, and she asked me if I could tell you she doesn't sit on the edge of chairs anymore." Layla pressed the sketch pad to her chest. "She sits in the middle now," Melissa continued, "all the way down, like she's not afraid anymore." A silence passed between them, full of weight, but not heaviness. "Would you ever want to see her again?" Melissa asked. "If it's allowed?" Layla opened her mouth, nodded, before she could even form the words. "Yes, please, any time." Melissa gave a small smile. "I'll ask the caseworker. But she'd like that." They exchanged numbers, quick, simple, no promises yet, just possibility. After Melissa left, Layla returned to her room and placed the sketch pad next to the timeline and the folder labeled Truth. She stared at the drawing with the open windows and bright sun. She realized something then. This wasn't just about what had been prevented. It was about what had been restored. That evening, Layla stayed later than usual. She erased the board, cleaned the crayon bins, straightened each desk with care. But when she reached Aaliyah's desk, she didn't stop at the surface. She opened the drawer. Empty. So she added something. A small, folded piece of paper with one sentence written in her careful handwriting. "This seat will always be yours." She didn't mean it literally. Aaliyah might never return to this exact room. But the truth was, her story had changed the space. Her bravery had carved a crack in a broken system, a crack big enough for light to shine through. And maybe, just maybe, it had given a few other kids permission to speak too. Layla stood by the door as the hallway lights dimmed and the night custodian began his slow sweep. She looked back at the classroom. The tiny chairs, the crooked posters, the wall full of crayon-colored dreams. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders loosened. She didn't feel finished. But she did feel something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. Because the echoes Aaliyah left behind? They weren't fading. They were multiplying. And Layla intended to make sure every single one was heard. By Monday morning, Layla's name was no longer just whispered in the school hallways. It was being spoken across coffee shop counters, muttered in the staff parking lot, and printed in black font on folded newspapers in the teacher's lounge. A local blog had picked up the story first. "Teacher's call to CPS leads to arrest in Willow Creek." By noon, it was everywhere. The article didn't name Aaliyah. It didn't include the full report. But Layla's name was there, bold and unmistakable, and with it came a wave of noise she hadn't been prepared for. Some parents emailed their support, thanking her for protecting a child. Others were more subtle, asking if she was sure she hadn't overreacted. But a few weren't subtle at all. The front office forwarded her 3 voicemails that morning. One from a parent: "You ruined that man's life. Hope you're proud of yourself." Another: "Mind your own business next time, if you're still employed." And the third, quieter but sharper somehow: "Not all bruises are abuse. Teachers should teach, not play detective." Layla didn't reply to any of them. She just taught. She stood in front of the class, with her voice steady, her hands calm, and a storm boiling just behind her eyes. The students, mercifully, were too young to understand the world outside their bubble of spelling tests and snack time. They didn't notice the glances teachers exchanged in the hallway. They didn't hear the tension in the lunchroom when Layla entered. But Layla noticed everything. She noticed how 2 co-workers paused their conversation when she walked by, how one teacher she'd worked with for 5 years avoided eye contact altogether, how the principal, who had once spoken with polite neutrality, now seemed colder, more distant, as if doing the right thing had somehow made Layla radioactive. She spent most of the day pretending none of it got to her, but that act started to crumble when she found a folded piece of paper left anonymously in her mailbox. It read, "You should have stayed out of it." No name, no signature, just those 6 words, sharp as glass. She read it twice before crumpling it and dropping it into the recycling bin, but the weight of it stayed, tucked behind her ribs. That afternoon, she sat across from Denise in the counselor's office, hands curled tight around a lukewarm cup of tea. "They want me to regret it," Layla said quietly. "That's what this is about." Denise didn't speak right away. She leaned back in her chair, lips pressed together in thought. "They want you to feel isolated," she said finally, "because isolation is control." Layla stared at her. "I didn't expect a parade, Denise, but I didn't expect this either." Denise gave a tired smile. "You rattled a cage most people pretend not to see. That makes them uncomfortable. It's just, the system finally did what it's supposed to. Why does it still feel like I'm the one being punished?" "Because in a town like this," Denise said, "people don't like their routines disrupted. You took something they ignored and dragged it into the light." Layla nodded slowly. "I keep thinking, what if someone else hesitates next time, because they're watching what's happening to me?" Denise leaned forward, voice softer now. "Or what if someone steps up sooner, because you showed them it's possible?" The room felt quiet again. Denise took a sip from her own mug. "Have you heard from Aaliyah's aunt?" Layla shook her head. "Not since last week." "She's been keeping her distance on purpose," said Aaliyah. "Said Ahila still asks about you, but she's worried the trial will dig up more attention than the girl can handle." Layla swallowed hard. "I'd never do anything to make it harder for her." Denise nodded. "She knows that." The next day, Layla received a call from the district office. The voice on the other end was formal, clipped. "We're scheduling a review of your mandated reporting conduct as standard policy. You'll be interviewed next Thursday." Layla didn't ask questions. She just said, "I understand," and hung up. But later that evening, she sat alone at her kitchen table with the documents she had saved, the timeline, the notes, Aaliyah's drawings, and placed them neatly into a binder. A shield, not against the truth, but against the people who didn't want to see it. And when she closed the cover, her phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. "Hi, Ms. Myers. It's Melissa. Aaliyah's been asking again if she can write you a letter. Would that be okay? Layla replied instantly. Yes, please, I'd love that more than anything. There was a pause. Then another message appeared. She drew you something, too. She says she's learning to be brave again. She wants you to know. She's not scared to sit anymore. Not scared to sleep either. Layla stared at the screen, her throat tight. She didn't respond with words. She couldn't find any that were big enough. Instead, she looked up at the ceiling and let herself smile. A quiet, trembling smile that came from a place deeper than pride. This was why she had spoken. Not for headlines, not for thanks, but for one small girl who had once drawn cages instead of windows. For the sound of a voice that had been almost lost. The next morning, as she walked into her classroom and saw that Aaliyah's seat was still empty, she didn't feel sorrow. She felt steady, because now she knew something most people never would. You don't need applause to do the right thing. You don't need approval to be the one who acts. And sometimes, when the whole world tells you to sit down and be quiet, you stand up anyway, because someone out there is watching, and maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for a sign that it's okay to stand, too. Spring arrived in Willow Creek quietly, without fanfare. There were no parades, no big announcements, just the subtle signs. The sound of sneakers on pavement instead of boots in mud. The smell of damp grass on morning walks, and the way the children ran a little faster during recess, as if the air had finally loosened its grip. Layla stood by the playground gate, arms folded, watching her class scatter like dandelion seeds across the blacktop. The laughter came easy now, bubbling and bright, and though her eyes kept drifting to the corner where Aaliyah used to stand, hands in pockets, head down, she didn't ache when she looked. Not anymore. Because today, that corner wasn't empty. Aaliyah was back. She wasn't a student here again. At least, not officially. But today she was visiting. Just for the morning. Her aunt had worked out the timing with the caseworker, and Layla had cleared it with the principal personally. It wasn't for the school. It was for them. Just Layla and Aaliyah. One quiet reunion tucked inside an ordinary day. She spotted her the moment they pulled into the lot. Car door creaking open, tiny legs stepping out in bright yellow tights and sparkly sneakers. Her hair had grown longer, soft braids swinging against her shoulders. She held something to her chest, clutched like treasure. Layla met them by the front door. Melissa offered a warm nod. She's been counting the days. I have too, Layla said softly. Aaliyah stepped forward. She didn't run, didn't skip, just walked slowly until she reached Layla, and then, without a word, wrapped her arms around her waist and held tight. Layla bent down and pulled her close. No words. Feels just breath. Just safety. When they finally pulled apart, Aaliyah held up the thing she'd been carrying. A drawing, laminated and neat, of the tree, huge, with a thick trunk and roots that sprawled deep. In one of the branches a small girl sat reading, and next to her a woman with red shoes and a blue dress stood with a watering can, smiling. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, were the words, "You helped me grow." Layla's throat tightened. "I wanted you to have it," Aaliyah whispered. "I'll keep it forever," Layla whispered back. They walked the hallways together slowly. Aaliyah peeked into the classroom, smiled at her old seat, and touched the paper sign above the tissue box. Layla had left it there, even now. "You can always talk to me, even if it's with drawings." Aaliyah reached into her small backpack and pulled out a notebook. She placed it gently into the basket. "I wrote some things," she said. Layla knelt down to meet her eyes. "Would you like me to read them later or now?" "Later," Aaliyah said with a small smile. Some of them are scary, but they're not as scary anymore. Melissa stood at the doorway, watching quietly, giving space, but ready when it was time to go. Layla gave Aaliyah a last hug and tucked the drawing carefully into her folder. "You've gotten so strong," she said. "I'm trying," Aaliyah replied. Layla nodded. "You don't have to try alone." That afternoon, after they left, Layla sat at her desk with the drawing propped beside her and Aaliyah's notebook in her lap. She opened it. The first page had just one line. "It still hurts sometimes, but not as much." The next pages held poems, short and shaky, but powerful. One read, "The belt is gone. The night is quiet. I dream of stars." And, "Never hide it." On the final page, Aaliyah had drawn a picture of herself. Not a stick figure this time, but a real attempt. She'd colored in the smile. The eyes were big, curious. She'd drawn freckles. A crown of tiny flowers circled her hair. And beside the figure she had written, "This is me, free." Layla closed the notebook and held it to her chest. The wind outside tapped gently on the window. She glanced around her classroom. The children playing a math game in the corner, crayons scattered across the art table, the second Hard Things notebook halfway full. She thought about the review hearing, how the district had ended up clearing her with a formal letter of commendation, quietly delivered to her inbox one evening with no public ceremony, but full acknowledgement. She'd printed it, tucked it behind her copies of Aaliyah's first drawings. She thought about the community, how some parents still avoided her, how others had begun to stop her in the parking lot just to say thank you, quietly, almost apologetically. And she thought about the man now awaiting trial, a father who would never hurt that little girl again. Justice hadn't come in a roar. That had come in ripples. And Layla, somehow, had been the first stone thrown. That night, she got home and taped Aaliyah's new drawing above her writing desk, right next to the lamp. She lit a candle, opened her laptop, and began typing something new. Not a report. Not a lesson plan. Letter to the next teacher. To the one who might find themselves standing in front of a child who won't speak, but shows you everything in silence. To the one afraid to report, afraid to be wrong. Layla wrote, "Believe the whisper, even when the world tells you it's not enough." Especially then. When she finished, she closed her laptop and sat in the quiet. There was no parade, no applause, just the sound of a healed child's footsteps, faint but unforgettable. Layla smiled, because the victory wasn't loud, but it was hers, and was real.